Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of KerVAM. We are back in 2022, the second year of our podcast now as we move into almost episode, I think we're on episode 19, 18, 19, I lose track of what we're at, but somewhere like that. And of course, if you are new here, we are a Doctor Who podcast where generally we talk all about the Doctor Who Blu-rays and DVD releases, the special features, the VAM, hence why we're called KerVAM, on all the releases of Doctor Who through the classic and the new series. But today, as we have throughout Doctor Who Flux as well, we are focusing on the current era, the current episodes, and more of a review and discussion about the most recent episode, Eve of the Daleks. Of course, it was the New Year's Day special, one of our 3 episodes that we are getting in 2022. And it's an episode for me that I wasn't really looking forward to very much. And I'm very interested to hear what other people had to think about it. So, of course, as always, I am joined by Ryan, Charlie, and Bill. How are you guys all getting on this week?
Good, thanks, yeah.
Very
good. Doing very well, thank you.
Brilliant. Good to hear you all had a good Christmas, guys.
Yeah, it was really good, thank you.
Fab.
Yeah,
and
season 17 box set.
Yeah, of course. Have we all got the season 17 box set then?
Yeah.
I've actually done it, yeah.
There we go, brilliant. So
got on my first collection Blu-ray, yeah.
Oh, very exciting. Have you had much of a chance to delve into it yet?
So I need to get a Blu-ray player first because it's my first Blu-ray, like I say.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was just too tempting with the special features and for me not to get, so I thought, no, I'll get it. And I'm glad I've got it now, actually, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'll be on our next podcast in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a deep discussion on season 17, on the interesting stories that are contained within it, and of course all the special features on the season 17 Blu-ray. So do join us in a couple of weeks for that, and we'll have lots of discussion about season 17. But of course, today we're talking about Eve of the Daleks. As I say, it wasn't an episode I was massively excited for because we've already had a couple of Dalek specials previously, and it just kind of after Flux, it looked like it was just going to be a bit of a nothing episode. Was my impression going into it, but Charlie, firstly, what was your impression going into it, and then did it kind of meet your expectations? Was it better? Was it worse? What was your kind of initial takes on the episode?
I think I did expect it to be quite good. I felt after the chaos of Flux and obviously the somewhat disappointing ending, I felt it'd be quite refreshing, and I feel on that aspect it kind of lived up to it. But I feel in terms of the execution, it was actually a bit better than I expected, because obviously I didn't have much faith in Chibnall after, the last couple of episodes, but I feel it was quite a good episode. It wasn't my favourite of the Dalek trilogy. I'd still say Resolution is, but I still think it was a really solid episode. I feel the plot premise was really interesting, and I feel the Daleks were actually portrayed as really cool, and I found it was quite clever of them. So they were just trying to execute the Doctor for revenge, basically, for what she did in Flux, rather than just overtaking the world. So I feel that was quite interesting. But I feel in execution, the pacing was a bit off. I feel the longer time loops actually lasted for less time than the shorter ones, which made it a bit weird. But I feel in execution, it didn't quite live up to the premise it was setting. It was still enjoyable, though, probably a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I actually just noticed just this morning, having a look back at some of the episode and things, as you mentioned, the pacing there, just a random thing I wanted to pick up on, was there's a scene, it's later on in the episode when the Doctor has her big speech with everybody in the sort of reception area, and they're all like, yeah, we're in, deal, we're going to go for it, and we're going to defeat them. And you feel like that moment's really building something up, and it's building up the pace. You're like, here's the Doctor's big speech before they're going to go and, save the day, blow up the warehouse, defeat the Daleks, yeah. But then that doesn't happen. Obviously, they get exterminated. We jump back into the next time loop. But suddenly, it kind of, for me, for a kind of inexplicable reason, it suddenly slows to a halt again. You've got Sarah running into the lift and then getting killed. I think Nick then gets killed. And then obviously we have all the stuff with Dan and Yaz chatting, it's some important stuff that needed to be there. But I just felt it was weird the way they paced that they kind of built it up. It kind of been ticking along at a reasonable pace, and then suddenly you'd reach that crescendo of her big speech, and then suddenly we've pressed the brakes and halted at that moment, and then it takes another 5 or 10 minutes before we get to that moment where the Doctor, Yaz, and Dan are sat in the sort of on the sofa, about to launch into the final time loop where they're going to defeat it. I would just sort of thought that speech, that moment should have happened later on in the story to then throw into the big, dramatic conclusion. The music's playing in, getting really excited, and they're going around and saving the day. And I just felt like that's kind of just a little thing that I didn't notice until I looked at it this morning, where it just felt slightly off. I was like, why did you kind of order the episode in that way? So yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you. The pacing wasn't quite there the whole time. Ryan, what was your take on kind of the episode and the execution of the episode?
Well, I will say, headed into it, I was hopeful it'd be good. I mean, after what happened with Flux, and especially with those last 2 episodes, I mean, anything was going to be look good in comparison compared to what happened previously. So I went into it, and I honestly enjoyed it more than I thought it was going to do. And I actually might think it's my favourite of the 3 Chibnall Dalek episodes. I think the concept of it was probably executed the best as it can be, considering the circumstances when they filmed it and everything.
Yeah.
And I will say, and to agree with Charlie, it is definitely a 7 out of 10. And if I was to rank this amongst the other, if this was part of the Flux series 13, if I was to rank it among the episodes, it's probably my 3rd favourite behind Village of the Angels and War of the Sontarans. But it's definitely better than the other 4 episodes. That's definitely true for me. And in terms of that moment, with the pacing, I will agree. The pacing, it is a bit sluggish at times. I will tend to agree. But I actually like that after the Doctor gives that speech, they get exterminated after that. It's kind of a bit of a subversion. I think that's a neat way to kind of turn it on its head and think, oh, it's going to lead to a big moment, but then it doesn't immediately. I just think that's a nice little subversion. Yes, I will agree. I wish it could have been that subversion and everything after could have been paced a bit better. And in terms of having that moment between Yaz and the Doctor and Dan, I do think there are good moments. I do have a bit of an issue with it, and which I'm pretty sure I'll get onto a bit later. But I don't think the moments themselves were bad. It's just, well, as I said, I'll delve more.
Yeah, we'll move on to. We'll come on to that in a minute. We'll focus on the story as a whole, and then we will delve into the Yaz Doctor situation in a moment. But I think one of the things that surprised me in its strength was the fact that this episode, for the best part of, I think, 52, 53 minutes, is just these 5 characters in that warehouse. There isn't any other locations. There isn't any other characters. And yet, in general, like, I wasn't like I was sat there getting bored. It feels like the story's always ticking along. That even though there's not even that much kind of new happening, because you have, pretty early on, we realise, oh, we're stuck in a time loop. And I think it was a shame that all the characters work it out really, really quickly. Like, they only go through it once and they're like, oh, well, we must be in a time loop. Because, clearly Sarah, this character, who's just some random person from Earth, would obviously assume they're in a time loop with killer robots instantly. Like, it felt like a slight kind of jump, just kind of, I would have liked to have seen them gone through it maybe one more time before they all worked out exactly what's going on. Because that just felt a little bit quick for me. But then after that, it just felt like it kept ticking along fairly well, which I thought was a surprise, given it's just set in a warehouse for the whole episode, basically. So I thought that was quite impressive. But Bill, what was your initial take on the episode as a whole?
Yeah, so I was kind of looking forward to it, but I was looking forward to it mainly because, as I think Charlie said earlier, I'd hoped that it would be like very refreshing after what happened with the Vanquishers and everything. And I think it was ultimately like a really refreshing episode. And yeah, like how you say, it just stuck to one setting. It wasn't like with the Vanquishers, 20 million things going off and everything.
Yes.
It just stuck to the warehouse and 5 characters. And I think that played to its strength, because clearly Chris Chibnall, when he does that kind of thing, is much better at it than trying to do these great big series finales full of so many characters and settings and everything. So for him to then do this kind of episode, I think really played to his strengths as a writer. And yeah, I think it just worked a lot better anyway, because it felt more grounded, I suppose, in a way. It was just more, it wasn't as confusing to watch, even though it was a time loop. It wasn't that difficult to follow. It was just very straightforward time loop story, or as straightforward as time loops can get. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I've honestly, I would also say, like Ryan said about it being his third favorite of the series. I would say it's definitely my third favorite as well.
Yeah.
I'd rank it a little bit higher, maybe an 8 or 9. But yeah, I would definitely say it is one of the best of Series 13 and one of the best that we've had of the Chris Chibnall era.
Echoing what Bill said, having it just be 2 supporting characters, it definitely felt refreshing, because after Flux, which had just way too many characters, way too many subplots, having something this simple and concise, it was just like, oh, thank goodness, he's actually doing something simple and concise and actually cohesive. Thank God, after everything that happened.
Yeah, I feel like he's kind of looked at it and thought, I need to kind of balance out what happened in Flux and the amount involved in it by doing something much more small scale, more straightforward with a smaller number of characters, as you say, just to kind of combat that. I think the absolute chaos of Doctor Who Flux, and then maybe in the Easter special it'll be more of almost like the balance between the two, rather than going from one extreme to the other, like we've seen with Flux and Eve of the Daleks. But yeah, what did you all think of the guest cast? Because I thought that Ailing B, I don't know how to pronounce it now. I think it's Ailing B, isn't it? Is that how we pronounce it? I don't know. The character of Sarah, who I thought she was one of the best guest characters of the Chibnall era. Like, I really thought that just her performance, the way she carried off the comedy in this story, was really, really... one of the things I notice so often with Chris Chibnall episodes of Doctor Who is either the characters or the dialogue feels either clunky or just unbelievable. They don't feel like real people. Like, she felt like a real person, and it also felt like this comedy that was thrown in, which I don't think is Chris Chibnall's greatest strength, but generally I felt like it really sold in this episode. It worked. It made it funny. It made it enjoyable. And I think it probably helped that she was able to sell that performance. But I just felt like she really was a very, very strong kind of character, which you needed when there were so few characters in this story. I mean, the character of Nick, I don't know, where do we all stand on the characterization of Nick? Because I've seen on social media, a few people a bit questionable about the stuff he stores in his storage unit and the reasoning for that. Like, I think when I first watched it, I kind of glossed over it to an extent, maybe. But then when I watched it again and saw the social media response, I was like, yeah, maybe that wasn't Chris Chibnall's greatest idea ever. And the thing is, I can just imagine Chris coming up with the gag exterminated and then working backwards and creating his whole story off that one gag. Like, I can just picture Chris doing that. So, I don't know, Charlie, where do you stand on the guest cast of this episode?
What you were saying about, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Aisling, maybe? I don't really know. I did really like her character. I do think she was a very interesting and memorable character. I think, yeah, lots of the comedy as well, with her mum calling her on most of the time loops and everything. That was quite good. As for Nick, I don't know. I feel, yeah, while some of the stuff he did was a bit weird and questionable, I feel at least it made him memorable and have like a personality rather than just someone for the Daleks to exterminate. He's going to be more memorable than lots of the previous supporting casts we've had. And like they were saying, he's sort of like a weirdo with a good heart. Like, at the end of the day, he was quite nice. And I do quite I did like him as the episode went on. Whereas with Sarah, maybe I liked her a little bit less towards the end. I don't know. I'm not too sure. I did like Nick towards the end, though.
I can't decide where I sit with Nick. Like, I think I fundamentally like Sarah as a character. I think the comedy works and she's enjoyable enough. I'm just not sure whether, they really deserve each other at the end, really, because she's kind of pretty mean to him and he's a bit of a weirdo, slightly creepy. Like, it's one of those sort of love stories that I'm not massively buying into. It's kind of just there because it needs to be, and to give a comparison to the Doctor and Yaz as well, to an extent, I think, is the purpose of it, isn't it? I don't know. Ryan, what do you think?
Well, first off, Aisling B, amazing as Sarah. I was really worried they were going to waste it like they did with Craig Parkinson in the previous episodes, but thank God Chibnall didn't do that. She was amazing throughout. I don't know if that's because of the character or the performance. In a way, it's very similar to how I feel about Bradley Walsh as Graham and John Bishop as Dan. It's like, I don't know if it's the character or I like this character because of how the character's written, or the light entertainment performer coming in. I think she just brings a lot of real weight to the roles, a lot of sharpness, a lot of bluntness, which I think is just a key to a lot of her comedy. I'm just glad that it's like as if she was bringing a bit of herself into it, which is very amusing. As for Nick, yeah, it's very questionable. I've got to admit, even on the first time I watched it, I was a bit like, and I even face palmed numerous times during that. I mean, that bit with the exterminated, I actually grunted. I'm just like, this is basically the low point equivalent, just the same as the whole Wi-Fi talking joke in Resolution.
Yeah,
it's just
it was down that way, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you doing this? But I will say, yes, while a lot of Nick is a questionable character, at least I remembered him more than most of the supporting characters throughout the past 3 seasons. I mean, he's actually more memorable than the Grand Serpent. I will say that.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I think it probably helped there was less characters in this story, but I think just having those two definitely helped make it then make them more memorable. And I thought they were fundamentally good characters, even if some of the characterization of Nick was a bit questionable. As I said on Twitter, he could have just been obsessed with collecting Doctor Who merchandise. For it didn't affect the plot that he had a creepy obsession with keeping his ex's stuff, apart from the gag about X terminated. Like, he could still be a weirdo and all of that, and still come and see Sarah every New Year's Eve, and that all still makes sense without him having to do anything creepy. But there we go. I don't know, Bill, have you got any thoughts on the guest cast?
Yeah, so I definitely felt like Sarah's and Nick's, like, I think they definitely had chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways I see them working as a couple, but I think the problem you've got with this episode is their relationship is formed very, very quickly. And I mean, I get it that obviously, when they experience a near-death situation, obviously that's going to help them kind of get together, I suppose. But it's like, I understand to some extent, I think, what Chris Chibnall was trying to do with Nick, for example, but I think there are definitely better ways of trying to make him a bit of a weirdo than the way they did it. Because it's all of that kind of creepiness for the sake of a cheap gag. I mean, was it really worth it? But it's fine, because at the end of the day, Aislinn B and Ajani Salman, at least, really, like, because they're obviously comedians themselves and everything, they've done comedy before, they really excel at the comedy side of it. And so I definitely believe in their relationship to an extent, but I think that it's weird how at the end of the story they end up flying around the world together as their first date, and I'm thinking that's a very strange first date, but if it works for them, then that's fine.
Well, indeed.
But it just feels weird, because I know, yes, they've been through a lot together and everything, but it still feels like we haven't really seen them properly, like, together to really truly get to know each other yet. And so then, it's, I don't know, it's like I say, I think the whole thing with Nick's exes, that could have been handled a lot better. But the comedy, like I say, was definitely on point, and I think that is ultimately what made me, like, be more or less, I wouldn't say like I was okay with what Nick was doing, because what he was doing, keeping all that stuff, was very strange. Maybe, I don't know, they were trying to come at it with an angle of, I don't know, like neurodivergence or something, maybe trying to make him something like that. But again, I think there's just better ways of doing it ultimately. But ultimately, they were both great comedy actors, and so therefore they really excelled with the comedy. And so therefore the comedy in this episode felt a lot better than it has done throughout a lot of other Chris Chibnall era episodes, like the aforementioned Wi-Fi scene and chocolate scene and everything.
Indeed, yes.
The less we say of, the better.
Well, exactly.
Well, in terms of resolution, funny enough, there is a little bit of a link, considering that they're both Dalek stories, and they have a sort of a love story in the middle of it.
Yep.
And I will say, even though they're supporting the couple in this, I would say they're more memorable characters. Well, I think that's primarily because of Aisling B. I think the love story was might be better handled in resolution. Because at least there was a bit of stakes involved in that, considering that the cat, I think her name was Lynn, gets possessed by a Dalek, and even that kind of adds to the stakes a bit.
Yeah, certainly.
But I do think the characters in this story were more memorable, I will say this. I think that's mainly due to the performances. But I will say, just like those two stories, the comedy, maybe not the best. Definitely not the best comedy, shall we say. I mean, the less said about Exterminated, I think the happier we'll all be.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. I feel what you were saying, Bill, about them like flying around the world together. I feel as well, what I noticed was, why would a character like Sarah, who's, fairly grounded and down to earth, meet someone who was creepy as Nick was, and then decide about 3-4 days later, maybe, I don't know how long it was, to go and travel the world with him? It's just even more realistic considering her character. Like, if it was someone else like Nick, maybe, but with Sarah, no, it's just even more weird and unrealistic.
Yeah, it does feel like a case of, well, I think it's a problem that Doctor Who often has of, you've got guest characters that you've kind of got to just wrap up stories within an episode, and it means you kind of end up jumping to, if you think about it too much, unrealistic conclusions of love stories and relationships and whatever. And I think it's probably a festive special problem as well, isn't it? It's Christmas, it's the New Year, whatever. We can get away. We roll with it. We kind of have to, because otherwise, there's a few moments like that in the story. But Ryan.
I was basically echoing what you just said. I mean, it is basically that time of the year. It's, of course, any romance is bound to get glorified and overblown in any sort of way. But then again, love can make people do crazy things. So who am I to judge? Whatever floats their boat, I guess.
Indeed. I think it's a really good episode, but I think it's an episode where you just have to gloss over a few things in it to be able to roll with it as an episode. Like the climax of this story, supposedly they start the last loop at 11:59 and they have 1 minute to solve everything. There is no chance that everything we see done in that last loop happens in the space of 60 seconds. Like, that's nonsense. So it's very much, you've just got to suspend your disbelief and just roll with it, because it's New Year's time, because it doesn't stand up at all in that sense.
Yeah, once you understand the time logic in Doctor Who, anything is possible.
Exactly. But it's also why, I've seen people moaning about the Daleks that can't aim, the Stormtrooper Daleks. I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. They've been doing this since 1963 with Daleks that can't aim and whatever. Like, it's hardly like it's something new and something. It's just a Doctor Who thing. Like, I just didn't really understand why people were so irate about it, frankly. But yeah. Anyway, let's come on to the Doctor and Yaz, because that was probably the most significant moment of this story, really, especially in the more longer running arc of the last, 3 series, really, since it was kind of vaguely first hinted at in series 11 and then more clearly later on in series 12 and in, the Timeless Children, Revolution of the Daleks, and through Flux. And then we get that big moment for Yaz, confiding in Dan. Dan just being a guy who we don't really know why he's there. He doesn't really serve any purpose apart from getting Yaz to talk about her feelings and trying to get the Doctor to understand this. Like, Dan, I don't mind Dan. He just doesn't do very much. But Charlie, what did you think about the way they handled, Yaz confessing her feelings for the Doctor, and how do you think that's likely to play out over these last 2 episodes we've got left?
To be honest, I've never really been a fan of Doctor-companion relationships. With something like, there was kind of a sort of thing with like 4 and Romana too. That's all right, because they're both Time Lords. But at the end of the day, the Doctor is how many thousands of years old or whatever. And at the end of the day, Yaz is a human who's probably considered like a baby in Time Lord years. It's just a bit weird, really. As well, I feel if it's going to happen, it's been done a bit late, really, considering the 13th Doctor literally has about like 2 hours left of episodes. You know, it doesn't really. There's not enough time for anything to happen. I feel if Chibnall is just doing that to develop Yaz's character in the last couple of episodes, like her getting sad because they can't be together or whatever, maybe something in the centenary special, that would kind of be interesting if done well. But at the end of the day, if anything is to come of it, it's been done a bit late, really.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems, isn't it? Ryan, what do you think?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, in terms of romances between Doctor and companion, I think the only time it really sort of clicked to me was when they sort of did it with 12 and Clara, because there was a bit of that going on between as it builds throughout series 8 and especially in series 9.
Oh yeah,
I feel like that's the only time it ever really clicked for me. So yeah, I mean, I was never really into Ted and Rose, controversial as that may be. I'm afraid it never really clicked for me. But with this, it's exactly what Charlie said. It just feels too little too late at this point. It feels like the culmination of something that hasn't been built up throughout the past 3 seasons. There may have been glimpses of it if you looked really deep into it, but it just feels like you need to have laid the proper groundwork in order to earn these moments. As decently handled as the moments were, it just feels like you had to lay the groundwork and build up to it so it feels more organic. So by the time it does lay on and finally culminate in this, it makes sense. But yeah, to introduce it now when we've only got 2 episodes left, it just feels really odd. It's just exactly like how it is in the last episode when they invite Dan to join the team. It's just like, you've only got like a few episodes left. It feels too little too late at this point.
Yeah, it as good as it was, and I think it was really well handled in this episode. The performance from Mandip Gill, I thought was really, really, it was great. She really sold that, and it's something that Chibnall's just kind of been too subtle with. It's like when he did The Timeless Child and mentioned it once in series 11, and then suddenly it's the big thing of series 12. Like, he just didn't seem. I don't know if it's because there wasn't the forward planning that needs to be there, but like just kind of building it up more substantially over his 3 series would have worked so much better. And as we say, like, there's only 2 episodes left, and I kind of feel like it's all setting up for the Doctor dying, saving Yaz or something like that. Because they're in love with each other and whatever. And I mean, it's pretty clear in this episode that the Doctor knows she's going to die soon. Like, there's a lot of those, like, foreboding looks, and there's a moment early on the episode where they're in the TARDIS and it's about to be reset. She says, if we don't leave in 7 seconds, we'll all die. Play dramatic, sad music. Doctor stares into distance. It's like, she clearly knows and she's going to die. Time's catching up with me, blah, blah, blah. And so I guess it's maybe giving more emotional weight to her death, because I don't feel like as a character, 13 should be that sad about dying for herself. Because she doesn't strike me as a sort of vain character who's obsessed with herself, who's really going to be worried about dying. But if she's got someone like Yaz, who she knows cares very, is in love with her, maybe that was what will then create the emotion of, her having to regenerate. I mean, I don't know how the heck they're going to get rid of Yaz now, because clearly Yaz isn't just going to choose to leave like Ryan and Graham did. Presumably they've got to kill her off, because I don't really see what the alternative is. So I don't know, maybe she'll die at the hands of the Master in the Centenary Special, possibly something like that. I don't know. It's all theories. I mean, Bill, how did you think it was dealt with in this episode, and do you think it's possible to do anything good with it in the last 2 episodes?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like Charlie said, I myself, I'm not really fussed about romances between the Doctor and their companions and everything, because it just doesn't personally interest me that much. And I think the classic series way of doing it, with the Doctor being kind of like above those kind of things, I feel like that is probably the best way to go with a character like the Doctor. But having said that, I do agree it was definitely well handled in the episode. And I definitely think Mandip Gill gave a very good performance of it. Like her whole coming out to Dan and everything, that was really well handled and well acted out and everything, I think. I mean, before this episode, I was not really like that. Like I say, I was not really that fussed about the Doctor getting together with any of their companions. But if Chris Chibnall wants to do something original and different with it, then I'm completely here for that. I don't want it to end up like 10 and Rose, because I didn't like that either. And I don't want it to just be like how it was with Martha, where it's just unrequited love. I don't want it to be as simple, as basic as that. If they really want to try and do well with the short amount of time they've got left, just 2 episodes, then it would be nice if it was just something more interesting than that, because it's already been done, those approaches and everything. So hopefully Chris Chibnall is going to do something a bit different with it, and isn't just going to have the two of them get together and they live happily ever after until 13 regenerates. But at the same time, she doesn't reject Yaz either, or something like, just something a bit different would be nice. And seeing as it's like the first relationship between two, I know there's like Vastra and Jenny, but I suppose really that's not quite the same thing, because Vastra and Jenny weren't like proper full-time characters in the same way that the 13th Doctor and Yaz are. So I just really hope that with this being the first same-sex relationship between definitely a Doctor and their companion and everything, I just hope that Chris Chibnall knows what he's doing and doesn't just then, like I say, retread old ground and do something that's already been done. I hope he gives it justice, and I just hope it turns out like to be original enough.
I will say the fact that I don't feel it's been built up enough. This is kind of echoing what I'm going to said in the last podcast we did, which is where I said that I don't feel like I'm ever going to love Jodie's last episode, because again, this last episode is meant to be the culmination of her entire era, and it's just like I haven't really felt any attachment to this era, or any of these characters. Like I never really bought into these Doctor, connected with this Doctor, all these companions, but key of all, I never really bought the connection this Doctor had with these companions, and because I haven't really bought the sort of romance between the Doctor and Yaz, since it's only just now been introduced and we've only got a couple of episodes left, I'm not going to feel any sort of emotional sadness or weight or grief when they have to part ways at the end of the last episode.
Yeah, so I think, thinking about Yaz and the Doctor, for me, like, I know, Bill, you said about it being important not to retread the same ground we've seen with either the Doctor and Rose's, obsession with each other, or we've had 12 Clara, as well as Ryan said, and the likes. So my kind of perspective is I do think that the Doctor loves Yaz, but she almost doesn't realize that she does, because she doesn't really understand her emotions. She doesn't really understand how to like open herself up to people, and so I feel like she's almost like got this feeling for Yaz, but she doesn't quite really know what it is or how to express it, and that's why she kind of, when Dan tries to push her a little bit, she isn't kind of trying to just hide it from Dan. I think she kind of almost doesn't accept it, doesn't understand it fully, maybe. And which I think is quite an interesting take. We've seen that with this Doctor. I mean, I know it was a little bit questionable when we saw her, really badly dealing with Graham, confiding in her about his cancer back in, I think it was Can You Hear Me? And I know that got a lot of backlash for the kind of choosing to characterize the Doctor in that way. But I just feel like that's the real route that Chris Chibnall has gone for with this Doctor. She still has barely told Yaz anything. Like, Yaz still doesn't have a clue about the Timeless Child, about, who the Ruth Doctor really is, and everything. She doesn't understand any of it, because the Doctor, even to this point, has still never actually explained it. And Yaz, comments in this episode when she says, "We're never going to get that moment on the beach where you tell me everything, are we?" And I think that might be the point, almost. Like, I kind of almost like, I don't think that's ever going to happen, because it's been built up for so long that Yaz doesn't know these things, and maybe that would make all the difference. I mean, do we think that Yaz kind of understands regeneration and stuff properly? Has she ever really had that explained to her? I can't actually remember.
I think she discovered it in spy form because of Graham mentioned something about saying that the first time I met the Doctor, she had just gone through something called regeneration.
Oh, yeah.
She does sort of know about it, even though she doesn't. Well, she hasn't really witnessed it.
No.
Because there's been hardly any mention of the previous incarnation, since the Doctor hasn't really opened up to any of it.
Exactly. I think there's a moment at the end of Spyfall Part 2, after we have the whole scenes with the master hologram in the TARDIS and stuff. I think in that moment is kind of one of the few moments where she does kind of open up a little bit, and she's like, I'm the Doctor, I'm a Time Lord from Gallifrey, the usual stuff, but just gives a little bit of a hint to them of who she is. But apart from that, she's just been so guarded as a character to who she is, and I don't know, maybe that'll be her downfall in some way or something, but it's definitely a very clear character trait that Chris Chibnall sort of brought into it. Yeah, Charlie.
I know what we were saying. I believe it was in the discussion of Survivors of the Flux, maybe, and we were saying that it might be a possibility because of all this bottled up rage about the timeless children, and now her maybe feelings for Yaz. It might further hint towards perhaps her going a bit unstable and crazy, kind of like Time Lord Victorious, perhaps. Maybe at the end of Legend of the Sea Devils or for the Centenary Special. I don't really know, but maybe that's another factor into it.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, actually. I do. I am, as much as I know we're not all, super excited for how the end of Jodie's era is going to play out, and there are definitely some problems there, but I am very interested to see the approach to the character that Chris Chibnall takes in terms of Jodie facing up to her regeneration, because we've seen, the last kind of 3 Doctors have all been pretty, not wanting to regenerate, pretty emotional about it. Like, obviously David Tennant was the key one, but Peter didn't want to change. He held it off for an extra episode so we could have a Christmas special in 2017. And even Matt Smith, there was still a reasonable amount of not really wanting to go through that change. It's not really, since Chris Eccleston's kind of the only guy who was just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm regenerating now. Bye. That, and we haven't seen that since. So I'm really just interested to see the route that Chris Chibnall takes, and I think it will all hinge on Yaz ultimately. I think that relationship has, as much as it's been brought in late, I think it's been brought in at this point so that it can then play into some big emotional climax in her last episode, and tying into her regeneration and everything. I don't know, Bill, what do you think about all that, and how do you think they're going to approach that in the last episode?
Yeah, so I don't know. It depends on how they're going to approach it ultimately, because until we've seen the Centenary Special, we can only guess, obviously. But I don't know. I've never kind of completely liked the fact of the Doctor being this socially awkward. Like, I get it. The Doctor is an alien, of course. The Doctor's not. No matter how experienced and how many times the Doctors have all travelled with human beings, and everything, I get that ultimately they're still an alien, so therefore they're not going to completely get humans and expressing feelings and everything in quite the same way. But if it is true that Chris Chibnall has set this up to be a major part of the 13th Doctor's personality, like you say, then I think that would help me kind of be a bit more keen on the idea of it, because then it would have actually meant something. They're not just letting her being socially awkward for the sake of it. It's not just her being quirky, it's it actually means something. As for how that will play into the whole thing with Yaz and her, again, I just hope that whatever they have planned to do, I just hope that they can pull it off effectively enough. And I do agree that I think Yaz is going to play a big part in the 13th Doctor's regeneration. I do think that we might well get into something like you said earlier, I think with her sacrificing herself for Yaz or something like that. I think that is definitely on the cards. But yeah, I don't know. Like I say, at the moment, I'm not massively keen on this social awkwardness to some extent, but if they can pull it off and there's a really good reason behind it, then I'll definitely be way more keen on it. Yeah. And it will make a lot more sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I am very interested to see how it all plays out. And so, well, is there anything else you guys particularly wanted to say about Eve of the Daleks? Yes, Charlie, go for it.
I was just going to say what you, Bill, were saying about 13's characterization as being quite socially awkward and quirky. I'm okay with that being a personality trait, but I feel for the Doctor, it's kind of an easy way out. Like, I feel it's quite a lazy characterization. I feel it's more interesting if they do like some sort of anti-hero traits like they did with 10, 11 to some extent, and 12. Surprisingly not, but it just seemed that he was quite, angry and annoyed at the start of his era. But with 13, it's just sort of, while she does have personality traits, they're the only ones, and they're probably the easiest to write.
Yeah.
I will say, in terms of the whole social, I wish, in terms of these character flaws with the whole being social awkward, I'm okay with her having like a character flaw, but I wish it was sort of much more built organically throughout her run. I mean, if you look at, say, Capaldi, for example, I mean, when he started off in Series 8, he's still not fully the Doctor. He's still very, very cold, angry, what I like is that they comment on it numerous times throughout that series and from other different characters. So when it all comes to a head in that graveyard scene in Death in Heaven, he finally reaches that ultimate catharsis and he becomes the Doctor again.
Yeah.
And deep down, he's not a monster. And I feel like that is one of the best character arcs for a Doctor ever, just having this journey of self-discovery throughout the series. And I'm hoping that I really wish Chibnall had done something like that for Jodie Whittaker, and it just feels like if that's going to play ahead in this socially awkward vibe come to a head in her final episode, it's not going to feel as satisfying because the build up to it wasn't as strong beforehand. So hopefully Chibnall can find a way around it, and who knows, it could end up being good, her last episode, but I still feel like I'm going to feel at least emotionally unsatisfied, considering there hasn't been that much build-up. Oh, and I've only just realised one final thing with this episode. They mention that the dad says to the Doctor, "You've only just saved the whole universe last week," and I'm just like, "Did you really?" Because didn't the flux destroy most of the universe? And I'm just like, is the universe restored or not? What is happening?
I think we really are going to get, it really is going to be decided by one piece of Dan dialogue is going to be the explanation. The universe is just inexplicably back to normal, when clearly what she did not reverse the effects of the flux that previously happened. Like that wasn't what happened in the Vanquishers as far as I saw. But according to Dan, she saved the universe last week, so everything must be fine now. And, I don't get the impression that a Sea Devil story is going to, particularly explore, is the universe still okay when they're already on Earth and stuff in the 19th century? It's a historical story with Sea Devils. Like, it's not going to be about that. So unless they're going to tackle it in the last episode, which I guess they might. And I don't know, I was a bit confused by the lines the Doctor kept going on about how, my time is catching up with me, my actions are catching up with me and stuff. Like, because it could be read as it just being about the Daleks wanted to kill her because she did the stuff with the flux and all that. But then it's also mentioned by Yaz right at the very end of the story, when she could have worked out for herself if she thought it was that. But the fact they drop it in the last scene in the TARDIS suggests that the whole time catching up with me is much more about her ultimate, demise rather than about this particular episode. I don't know. Do we have any thoughts on quite what time catching up on us is meant to be all about?
Probably.
Yeah, Charlie, go for it.
Probably the Master.
That's what I thought it might be. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it might also be to do with the time entity that was explored in Flux, because
true.
I mean, because there was this entity time, whatever it is, saying this false warning at the end of the last episode about how the Master's coming back, and maybe that it's not just the Master, but also this time entity could play a factor in her last episode.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Because even then, that was also another thing from Flux that was never really properly addressed. What's the whole deal with this time entity thing.
Yeah, it was all left a little bit open. And I mean, what was the Master doing for the whole of Flux as well? Like, what was he up to? When, you know, presumably he escaped Gallifrey, you know, in his little TARDIS that was conveniently sat next door at the last minute. And then what? He just, you know, hid away for the whole of Doctor Who Flux or something. I don't know. He's got to have some grand plan that he's coming up with that's going to be, you know, playing out in the last episode.
Could the Cyber Time Lords be a factor in all this, or did they just get blown up in the timeless?
Well, you know, I mean, they were clearly everybody's favorite incarnation of the Cybermen. We all love that design and love them. They're great, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if they do bring them back, I mean, yes, there was the design of those Cybermen were absolutely ridiculous beyond belief, but I mean, I do mind the concept of them.
Yeah,
the problem is they just didn't do anything. That one of the many reasons why I did not like that episode, because they introduced this powerful race of Cybermen and they just stand around not doing anything. And it's just like, if you're going to do something this big, you need to do something with it. And maybe they could in the last episode, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just dropped them entirely.
Because, like, you know, the Master could turn up with 5 of those on the Earth and destroy the Earth because they regenerate. So, like, they're never going to be destroyed, Cybermen. So, you know, it's not like he needs a lot of them to come and just take over the Earth or something, because obviously that's what it'll end up being, won't it? You know, the Master wants to take over the Earth or, you know, do some evil scheme on Earth, because that's, you know, what the Master often boils down to. But anyway, Eve of the Daleks, overall, we were pretty happy with it, reasonably enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was a good story. Easily the third best of this season. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, we had my favorite moment from Saturday night was, of course, the Next Time trailer. The way they built up to it with the gradual on-screen text of Legend of the, and then as that shot kind of comes into focus, I was like, no, surely not, it can't be, are you serious, it's the Sea Devils. So, you know, I was cheering when we saw that shot of a Sea Devil there. I have to say it was a great moment. Bill, the Sea Devils, are you well, I assume, have you seen the Sea Devils, the classic stories with the Sea Devils in? Yes, so are you excited to see the return of the Sea Devils, you know, 17 years into Classic Who? I feel like for most of those 17 years, the fans have been asking for the Sea Devils to come back. But are you excited for it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know it was like heavily rumoured months and months ago that it was gonna, the whole Easter special, if it is Easter, would be about pirates and Sea Devils and everything. Yeah. Obviously, at the time, I think that was rumoured. I think we all just kind of thought, oh, well, that would be nice, but I don't think they'll actually do that, because Sea Devils have been rumoured to return for goodness knows how long, and they never have until now.
Yes.
So, but yeah, to actually have them back and to have, again, a really, really good redesign of them, being very faithful to the original design, but still adding something new to it. Exactly like how we had the Sontarans in series 13. I'm just completely on board for that. Yeah, I'm glad they went with mainly just redesigning the original design from the 70s, as opposed to that weird, cheesy, samurai looking.
Yeah,
from Warriors of the Deep.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad they went with that one instead. Because, and I think they also have like little like nets
thing.
Pendant, of like some of the original nets clothing they wore, and that's like a really good nod, I think, to their original appearance. I don't know, I mean, I'm really hoping that they're done well. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think they probably will be, because I think this is something that I think most people, even if, you know, they're not massive fans of Chris Chibnall era, I think ultimately one of the biggest strengths of this era has been, at least it's always handled the classic monsters or original monsters really, really well.
Absolutely.
That has definitely been one of the greatest strengths of this era. Like, you've had it with the Daleks, you've had it with the Cybermen, the Master, the Sontarans, Weeping Angels, now the Sea Devils. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then the whole pirate stuff looks very interesting as well. I don't know much about it, but I'm really looking forward to finding out more, because I think it's about a historical figure, like a lesser known historical figure, which is always very interesting.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it, because even if the episode itself turns out to be not that good, it will have been, I'm sure the Sea Devils themselves have been handled really well. And it's just nice to see them back after so long.
Indeed, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Charlie, do you think that we're just going to end up with another the Sea Devils were here first? We want to take back the Earth storyline that we've done with Sea Devils and Silurians since the 1970s, or something new?
I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't mind if they did just another generic they want the Earth back, because the new Sea Devil design looks really fantastic. Like it looks like it's been ripped straight out from 50 years ago, but CGI'd and modernized. I feel it looks really good, and I feel if there's one thing that people like overlook about the Chibnall era, whether it has its faults or not, is bringing back monsters like Sontarans, like Resolution, Revolution, and Eve of the Daleks. War of the Sontarans, Village of the Angels. I don't think anyone has really disliked those episodes. Like the general consensus has been really good. So I'm hoping that that'll stay for Legend of the Sea Devils. And another thing I found out, it has been 9 years since we've had a villain from Classic Who reappear for the first time in New Who. It was with the Zygons back in Day of the Doctor. So I feel it'll probably be the best special of 2022. I really do think it'll be quite good, and probably the last proper, just normal episode, really, of the Whittaker era, since, we haven't really had any since, like, Can You Hear Me, really?
Yes.
It's just been specials, Flux, or the 3-part finale of Series 12, so it'll be nice to have a refreshing, normal Doctor Who episode, for the better or worse.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you say with Can You Hear Me, I think that, or you could say that the Eternals were in that, and it was Praxeus was the last time there wasn't a classic monster returning in an episode of Doctor Who, which, it is what it is. I don't personally think it's a problem to have classic monsters in there, as long as they're dealt with fairly well. I don't think it makes really any difference. So I don't know, but I do tend to agree with you, Charlie, that it could well be the best special of the year. And the last normal episode of Doctor Who probably until 2024, because we've got the centenary special, then we probably got a 60th anniversary special after that, and then maybe Series 14 will be in 24. So, yeah, it could be the last more normal episode of Doctor Who for quite a long time. What about you, Ryan? What's your take on Sea Devils?
Well, first of all, I'm really happy that they brought them back. I mean, one thing's for certain, there's no way, even if it could end up not being good, there's no way it can be as bad as Warriors of the Deep. I mean, Warriors of the Deep is still the absolute low point of Doctor Who ever, as far as I'm concerned. So anything's got to be better than that. And I'm really happy that with the design, it's much more of a bit of an update instead of a revamp like they did with the Silurians, which I'm still not entirely sure if that really worked. Because I think it's just a generic lizard design as opposed to being an update of that. What was a really good design back in the 70s. And the fact that they're doing, I'm hoping that it is a bit of a blend of a pirate story and a traditional Sea Devils want to reclaim the Earth story combined. I really hope it's a combination of the two, because I'm a sucker for pirates, I'm not going to lie. And of course, the Sea Devils was one of my personal favourite stories from the John Pertwee era and the entire 70s, frankly. So, I mean, I will agree with Charlie. I think it's likely it could end up being the best of the 3 specials. I think I'm a feeling this is going to be at least another good one, and who knows, it could end up overtaking either the Daleks or even War of the Sontarans as the third or second best of this series.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's going to have a bit more scale to it than Eve of the Daleks did. We're going to be out on pirate ships and in the sea and in this little Chinese village, I think, and whatever. I don't know where the village is. I think it was in China. Was it? I don't know. But yeah, we don't quite know when this special's going to be airing yet. There was a very vague, the press release was very vague. It said spring/later this year, which, I mean, we all kind of assume it's going to be an Easter special. It would mean most logical, but I suppose they could push it a little bit later, but I don't really see the reason quite why they would do that. So we've probably only got about, 3.5, 4 months to wait for this episode, and then 6 months or so after that until the centenary special. So it's, it's a little bit sparse this year, but at least we have, more than we did in 2019 when we just had a New Year's Day special, or, we had a 10-month gap from Series 12 to Revolution, then a 10-month gap from Revolution to Flux. So, at least we've got slightly more Doctor Who coming in 2022 than we have previously. But I think that pretty much is all we've got time for on this edition of KerVAM. As always, guys, please follow us on Twitter at KerVAMPod for all the latest updates on what's coming up. As I said earlier, we will be discussing the Season 17 Blu-ray. And I know, Ryan, you have particularly strong opinions about Season 17 of Doctor Who. So, and Creature from the Pit and the likes. So we'll have lots of fun discussing those stories in the next podcast in a couple of weeks' time.
Sure.
We certainly will, but it's going to be great fun. But until then, from me, from Ryan, from Charlie, from Bill, it's goodbye for now.